I need a table. They're on their own. I brought them.
Good morning.
Well, they're no longer visitors. They're not visitors anymore. Never having been.
I'll have to show them the picture.
Oh, yeah. Let everybody know that all.
I don't know. Good?
I don't know her.
Good morning, everybody. Let's get started in our Bible class this morning. Got a full house, it looks like. Appreciate your attendance. David, good to have you back with us. Several on our white sheet that you'll want to make mention of. If you were part of our congregation for many, many years, you remember when it used to be the white sheet. This is the white sheet anymore. It's the announcements anyway. A couple of things I'll highlight for you, but before I even do that, lest I forget, Charlie's alone this morning because Linda's at home sick, and we miss Miss Linda, but she'll probably be watching online, so we'll say hi to her and hope she feels better. Also this morning, you have this on your announcement sheet. Cindy put it on there as of this morning, but Emily had her baby, and so we're thankful for safe arrival and mama and baby daughters. What?
7:31 this morning.
Cindy is home.
Yes, I am.
Oh, that's Cindy.
This.
I thought you meant like the bulletin.
No, it's because Gayla had to do the door hanger, and Gayla.
Oh. Okay, sorry, ladies, you have your class back.
Good deal. Please notice the prayers are requested list. I'm not going to take our Bible class time here to go over each one individually, but many of those on the list, the majority of them on the list are connected to our class here. So please keep them in your prayers. Drop them a card, give them a call or something, let them know that we are thinking about them. So beyond that, what kind of announcement do we need to make? Except we've got a birthday this week, haven't we? Brian Brinyard, our local representative here. On the 21st.
My sister-in-law, Josie Wheeler, passed away a couple days ago. And so I just, everybody can remember the Wheeler family. I think her funeral will be Wednesday, sometime Wednesday, but I'm not sure about the time.
Janet's sister-in-law, Josie.
Josie, Max Wheeler's wife.
When did she pass away?
A couple of days ago.
Her daughter, granddaughter and great-granddaughter are actually participating a little bit. So I didn't know.
The funeral is, the
Wednesday.
viewing is at 1, and I believe the funeral is at 2.
Okay, on what day is it?
Wednesday.
Wednesday.
And I believe they're doing it at Cottonwood Church Drive.
Okay. Thanks for the update there.
She was in her upper 90s, I mean, way up there.
Wow.
Heath's mom, Wanda, pulled her back out and can't move. She's in a bad way.
Yeah, it's just something really going on for about a week. She just claimed she got her leg and she's
She
had
was
a
telling
hard
me
time.
about that on Houston.
Yeah,
It's gotten really
Not
bad.
gotten any better.
It's getting worse.
Worse.
I'm gonna go to a doctor from sometime, but try to see what's going on.
Just wanted to feel better soon. What else do we have?
Y'all pray for Greg. You know, he leaves Tuesday, and he'll be in Tanzania for 4 weeks.
Gone for about a month, huh? Yeah.
Did Kayla Phelps get results yet?
No, expecting those midweek.
She had a mass removed.
We're thankful she came through everything and got to go home Friday. But in a little pain, so hope for good results from that. What else do we have this morning? We good? Jeff, would you word for it, prayer for us?
Our Heavenly Father, Lord, thank you so much for this wonderful day you've blessed us with, Lord. Thank you for waking us up and giving us another day. Please watch over all the people that we've mentioned here this morning. May they get back to their wanted places in life and get better if it be thy will. Please forgive us of our sin. In Christ's name, amen.
Amen. Thank you, sir. I appreciate Jeff wording the prayer there. Thank you for waking us up this morning. I have tried, and I don't succeed every time, but I have tried to make it a habit of when I wake up in the morning before I ever sit up in bed to express my thanks to the Lord for waking me up another day, giving me another day, and helping me be about His business there. So appreciate those sentiments. You'll open your Bibles to Acts chapter 16. We're going to make some, just a few more remarks here in the way of introduction before we get over to the book of Philippians. We will get into that study today, Lord willing, but we left off in Acts chapter 16 of talking about some matters related to the establishment of the church in Philippi. And so I want to make a few more comments about that. I'll put the map back up here on the board and just make a couple of comments that we did last week about the route of Paul's second missionary journey. Of course, that's when he went over into Europe and established the congregation at Philippi along with many others on that second missionary journey. But now, where did the journey begin?
Hold on, remember it's Antioch.
At Antioch of what?
Syria.
Of Syria. There's two of them, Antioch of Pisidia and Antioch of Syria. We noted last week about all of Paul's missionary journeys began from Antioch of Syria. And it's interesting to note that for thousands of years, Jerusalem had kind of been the hub of religion, especially the Jewish religion. But it's almost intentional that it's moved away from Jerusalem here, and Paul doesn't start his journeys from Jerusalem. He starts them from Antioch. I may be reading too much into that, I don't know, but it's an interesting observation anyway.
Antioch is where people were first called Christians.
That's a good point. Acts, remember, it tells us that Antioch is where they were first called Christians. And that didn't happen. That happens in Acts chapter 11. You get me off on a tangent. Acts chapter 11 is when that happened. And what happened in Acts chapter 10? The conversion of who? Cornelius, the household of Cornelius, which was the open doors for the Gentiles to come into the church. And so after the Gentiles were welcomed into the church in Acts chapter 10, then the timing was such that we have them call first Christians first at Antioch. That's a good observation, Keith. So we won't go back into it, but reading the early part of Acts chapter 16 here, from Antioch around through Cilicia and over to Derbe and Lystra to Iconium, and he picks up who here? He picks up Timothy at that point, and then he continues along the way through parts of Asia here, and it's Paul's desire at that point to preach the word in Asia, but the Spirit did not permit that. And so we talked last week, I don't know how he was told, but he was prevented from doing that, and he was directed to go on around to Troas. That's where we're going to pick up here down. Let's go down to about verse 10. I want to remind you of a comment that we made last week in the text. Acts chapter 16, verse 10. Now, after he had seen the vision, immediately we sought to go to Macedonia, concluding that the Lord had called us to preach the gospel to them. Note the pronouns we and us here. Who's writing the book of Acts? Luke. So for the first time we have we used here, and that tells us that Luke has joined the party as they are on their journey here. And you might want to make, I probably won't say anything more about this, but you might want to make a marginal note here of Acts 20 verse 6, because on this journey here, they get to Philippi, And it appears like Luke stays at Philippi. And we don't hear any more about this we and us business from Luke until over on the third missionary journey. And when Paul goes back through the city of Philippi, then it appears like he picked up Luke at that point. So Luke stayed for months there at the city of Philippi. And we noted last week, Luke is normally referred to as the physician, and there was a school of medicine in the ancient world of Philippi there, so maybe there's a connection there, I don't know. But we'll pick up with verse 11. Therefore, sailing from Troas, we ran a straight course to Samothrace, and the next day came to Neapolis, and from there to Philippi. Look at the map. All right, from Troas here, he sails across the Aegean, the northern part of the Aegean Sea. Now, we begin to see providence at play here, because it was very unusual for a ship to sail from Troas to Neapolis. Most of the time, the ships sailing from Troas went down to Athens or Corinth or some place there on the Grecian peninsula. It was more common for ships to sail there. Well, why is that important? Why couldn't Paul have gone down to Achaia, the southern part of Greece there? Why couldn't he have gone there?
Well, he was probably called there.
Well,
That's where
it's
Leo
something
went,
here
right?
that we see back up in verse 9. What do you see in verse 9?
Yeah,
Oh, the man of
The
Macedonia.
the man in Macedonia was calling him, and that was part of the providence here involved, that he goes from Troas over to Neapolis, and he goes by the island of Samothrace. My second grandson is Sam. Okay, we have a creek down below the house, and when Sam was a little guy, he would come over to the house, and he liked to play on the glade rock down there that jutted out in that creek. Well, we named that glade rock Samothrace. Okay, so today, if I asked him where's Samothrace, he would take me down there and show me that glade that glade rock. So Samothrace, that means something to me. So he goes to Samothrace here, and in verse 12, we find him at Philippi, which is the foremost city of that part of Macedonia, a colony. We'll say more about that here in just a few minutes. So let's talk a little bit about the city of Philippi. The city of Philippi was originally named Crenides, Crenides, Crenides. Well, where did it get its name, Philippi? We'll get to that. Crenides means fountain, and the city of Philippi was originally named Crenides because of some springs that was located nearby. Well, that too is personal to me, because I grew up in a little town in North Alabama called Double Springs. Okay, Double Springs, the county seat, right in the middle of Winston County, the free state of Winston. Double Springs was so named because there were two springs. And Highway 195 goes right through the middle of Double Springs and covered up one of those springs. But there's a little park up there so when I talk about Philippi here and the original name of Crenides, Fountain Springs, it makes me think of where I grew up. Well, so Crenides there. Well, let's talk about Philippi first. Where did the name Philippi come from? Philip the what? Philip II. There we go. We got somebody that knows the history. Philip II, who was the father of whom? Alexander the Great. Yeah, somebody's done their homework. Alexander the Great. You remember him? Alexander the Great's that great leader of the Grecian Empire. That all of that happened in the 300s. Before that was during the time the intertestamental period. And so Philip II of Macedonia, Philip II of Macedon, he really took a liking to this little city of Crenides. And one of the reasons was that there was a lot of gold and silver located nearby. So a lot of that gold is what helped finance Alexander the Great's journeys as he began conquering the world. So I have a little bit of history there about the city of Philippi. Now, there are a few reasons why it was a great city. Number one, as I just noted, was because of the gold and silver nearby. Number two, we read about here in verse 14, it says a foremost city of that part of Macedonia, a colony. Philippi was a Roman colony. Now, as a Roman colony, they weren't subject to the laws around anywhere else. They were subject to the laws of Rome. And a lot of the Roman soldiers, especially when they retired, would move to Philippi. So Philippi is a Grecian or a Greek city here in Macedonia, but it's got a lot of Romans that lives there. That's going to be important. There's a lot of mixture here as far as the culture between Romans and between the Grecians that live there. Yes, ma'am.
Where are you reading from that says it's a colony, not
Verse 12.
I thought he said verse 14, so I'm trying to read verse 14.
I did too. I had to scroll back.
Y'all have to read between the lines sometimes. Because let me tell you a mistake I made last week, okay? And we're going to leave Acts 16 here very shortly. But last week I said something about there being 3 conversions in the book in chapter 16. Well, I was wrong. When I went back and looked, the account of the demon-possessed slave girl that we read about beginning in verse 16, Paul rebuked and removed the demon that possessed her, but there's no account of her being converted. We have the account of Lydia being converted and baptized, her and her household, and we have the account of the Philippian jailer later, beginning down in verse 25, he and his household being baptized, but we don't have that on. So maybe she was, maybe she wasn't, but I would be presumptuous if I said all 3 of them were converted. I will say this: out of the 3 encounters that we find here in Acts 16, 2 of them are what? Women. And that is very most unusual writings during this particular time. Okay, so getting a little bit ahead of myself. Let's talk about the third reason. The first reason was the gold and silver. The second reason was the fact that it was a Roman colony, and the third reason, no small reason indeed, was the location of it was on a major east-west highway. I'm going to swap maps here for a minute. Now, this is a map here that shows you, if you look at the green road up there at the top, there's a road that comes all the way from the western side of Macedonia. Actually, that road was coming from Rome, and it connected Rome over here. The green road that you see right there connected the city of Byzantium, which if you were part of our church history study within the last couple of years, you know that city later became the city of Constantinople when Constantine renamed it for himself. And then when the Roman Empire broke into east and west, that was actually the eastern capital of the Roman Empire. Now, it's no longer called Byzantium. It's no longer called Constantinople. Today, it's called what? What? Istanbul. The Muslims, years later, a lot of their conflicts, when they took over the city, they renamed it Istanbul. But here we have a major east-west highway that connects Rome with this eastern capital of Byzantium. And that highway is called the Egnatian Way. It's up here on the map. You probably can see it, but Egnatian, Egnatian Way. And that highway was about 700 miles long. Do you remember in Galatians 4:4, when the text says, in the fullness of time, God sent forth his Son, born of a woman? You remember that text? But particularly in the fullness of time. We've talked in times past about when the time was right for Christ to come, there were a lot of things that were present in the fullness of time. The timing was just right. And one of those things was the road system, the transportation and the roads that the Roman Empire had put into place. This was a major road here, and it was about 700 miles long. And you just think about back in that time, that would be a major thoroughfare. And notice, if you can see the map up here, the cities Neapolis, Philippi, Amphipolis, Apollonia, and Thessalonica are all on that major road. So as you read on through the book of Acts, if we were studying Acts here, you would see this second missionary journey go through a lot of those cities. Thessalonica, and Amphipolis and Apollonia is mentioned there in the text as well. Okay, so got one more picture for you. That road is still visible today, 2,000 years later. That's a picture, one of many. If you're interested in this sort of thing, we'll do a Google search of the Ignatian Way sometime, and you'll find a lot of different pictures there. But just imagine a road 2,000 years old that is still visible and still obviously used as some form of transportation. Okay, so let's move on.
Could you spell Ignatian?
Egnatian. The Ignatian Way. Let me go back to the map here as we finish our discussion. Okay, so the city of Philippi was a Roman colony, and as such, we know about that. But as prominent as the city of Philippi was, it doesn't appear like there was a synagogue there. Now, there's some reasons that we could probably assign to that. To have a synagogue in a city required a minimum of 10 Jewish males that would work the synagogue. Maybe there wasn't that many there. Some people even think that there was no synagogue in the city of Philippi because, remember, it was subject to Roman rules, and Rome wouldn't let wouldn't let these kind of outside religious influences in. Why do we know there was no? Why do we think there was no synagogue there?
Because they were meeting by the river.
Where did what?
Because they were meeting.
Where did Paul find the women? All right, let's pick it up down here on verse 13. On the Sabbath day, we went out of the city to the riverside, where prayer was customarily made, and we sat down and spoke to the women who met there. Now, a certain woman named Lydia heard us. She was a seller of purple. Now, that's a fairly high level of economic level here for her. And she was from the city of Thyatira. Now, if we went back to the map, so go back and see that. Where is Lydia set up right now in Acts 16? She's in Philippi. She's a seller of purple. But it notes that she's from the city of Thyatira. Now, if you look at the map up here now, you see that's pretty much in the middle of what's referred to as Asia. We would call it Turkey or Asia Minor today. But she's a good ways from home, set up over there in Philippi selling purple. So we're going to make some assumptions about her in just a minute. Okay, the Lord opened her heart to heed the things spoken by Paul, and when she and her household were baptized, she begged us, saying, "If you judge me to be faithful to the Lord, come to my house and stay." So she persuaded us. Make you a note here. The first convert, Lydia is the first convert in Europe. And Philippi, when he baptizes her and her household, then her household here will be the seed of the first congregation of the Lord's church in Europe, on European soil. Of course, there's going to be others on this journey here as he goes, continues here, but the church now is being established on European soil. Now, I want to just highlight. Well, let me go back let me say one more thing about Lydia. I know I'm probably emphasizing this point too much, but this is the only conversion in the book of Acts here that we have of a woman, and that's unusual. But if you want to look, maybe you want to make yourself a note. I have on mine down here, let's see, somewhere around verses 11 or 12 or 13 there when we start talking about 14 when we talk about Lydia. You might want to cross-reference 17:4. And if you look over at 17:4, you have Paul preaching over where? Thessalonica. Remember later on the journey, that's where you'll be over there in chapter 17. But this is what we read in verse 4. And some of them were persuaded, and great multitudes of Greeks, and not a few of the leading what? Women. Here again, unusual. Now, you could go on down to verse 12, and we read, therefore many of them believed, and also not a few of the Greeks, prominent women as well as men. Now, if you go on over to verse 34, I'm just giving you some cross-references here. You will see that when he's over in Athens, later on his journey here, some men joined him and believed, among them Dionysius the Areopagite, and a woman named Damaris, and others with them. So that you have several examples here on this second missionary journey of women being involved there. So let's make some application here and some points before we leave to go to the book of Philippians. We'll get there today. We're going to get close today. But I want to make some applications here. There are three groups of people that's encountered in Acts 16. The first one is Lydia, and he converts her and her household. The last one over here is the Philippian jailer. He converts him and his household after midnight. The in between those is the one that we mentioned earlier about the slave girl that was demon possessed, and Paul finally cast the demon out, and that caused problems with her masters because that was their means of making money. They got mad with Paul and Silas and threw them where? Threw them into prison. Watch God's providence work, because when they're in prison, that's where they encounter the Philippian jailer. But you might want to note, and this is kind of just planting a little seed here that we'll talk about more when we get over into Philippians. But look at verse 25 of chapter 16. At midnight, Paul and Silas were praying and singing hymns to God. Now here they are. They've followed the Spirit across over there, and they've preached and they've converted, and they're doing God's will, and they're laying in prison. And it's midnight. And they're bemoaning the fact that why are we laying here? No. That's not what they're doing. What are they doing? Praying and singing. So the first lesson here, we'll come back and emphasize this when we get into the book of Philippians a little bit. But Paul teaches us a lesson here that happiness, joy, is not depending on external circumstances. It's depending on your inward condition of your heart. That's a powerful lesson right there for us. And so let's plant that seed. We'll come back and talk about that a little bit later on. Now I want to go now to this idea of these three encounters, these three groups. You've got a woman, Lydia. You've got a jailer, the Philippian jailer. You've got a demon-possessed girl. So these three groups. Now remember I said that Philippi here is a city that's multicultural. It's filled with different races and different cultures. And we're going to talk about that as we get into the study of the book as well. But let's talk first of all social classes. Likely, as we referred to earlier, Lydia was probably an upper class citizen. She's, number one, she's the seller of purple. That meant she's pretty high economically. She's pretty far away from home here. She's a businesswoman. She's pretty far away from home here. we can make a pretty good assumption that she was in the upper class socioeconomically. The jailer, probably a middle class person, a working class person. And the demon-possessed girl, lower class. So it's not a stretch for us to say these three encounters he had here were three different levels socioeconomically. Let's look at the next point. What about the race? Now, the race of people, I had a little problem with this, still do, differentiating between race and ethnicity. Does anybody have a firm grasp on that? What's the difference between race and ethnicity? The best I can tell, and like I said, I get confused with it myself a little bit, but race has to do with your skin color. Okay, ethnicity has to do more with your cultural background. So first of all, I want to consider that likely we're dealing with three different races here. The first one, Lydia, was from where? Asia, Thyatira. She's an Asian. The jailer, because of his profession, is likely a Roman citizen here. And the demon-possessed girl, probably she would be Grecian. We can kind of assume that. Now that's not totally accurate to say that's three different races, because the Grecian and the Roman would be the same race, but Asian and European would be different. Let's carry it one step further. What about the ethnic groups? There's at least two different ethnic groups here, because Lydia is a Jewish woman and she's found on the riverbank, and what is she doing? She's praying. So we can assume that she's Jewish. The jailer, probably Roman, probably a pagan background. And the Grecian demon-possessed girl, probably as well. Now, what's my point with all of this? We today live in a multicultural world. We know people who are of different races. We know people of different socioeconomic levels. We know people who are of different ethnic backgrounds and different religious backgrounds and so forth. Your circle of friends would be all of those. But what does God expect of us with all of them? What did Paul do to all of them? With maybe stretching the demon-possessed girl. He taught them all. And so later, Paul made this comment in Galatians, and I know nowhere where it fits any better. In Galatians 3:28, Paul says this: there's neither Jew nor Greek. Look at it. There's neither slave nor free. Look at it. There's neither male nor female. See, we all need that gospel, no matter. And so there's no better place, I don't think, that we can find that than here in this particular place. Now let's leave here and go to the book of Philippians. I told you we'd get there. All right, so in the book of Philippians, I gave you earlier some keys to the book, and I'll remind you that the key word is either joy or rejoice. We'll talk about that a little bit here shortly. But let me just say this. In general, the book of Philippians, some people also say the word love is a key word, although you only find it in the first two chapters. It certainly permeates the entire book. Some people even refer to the book of Philippians as Paul's love letter to a congregation. He loved the church at Philippi here. We'll see that as we get into this even more. But the book of Philippians, though, is not a theological letter, not a deep theological study like the book of Romans. Remember, in the book of Romans, we talked about those theological terms like justification and righteousness before God. You don't find that kind of thing here in the book of Philippians. The book of Philippians is more of a practical book. As a matter of fact, I would say that second only to the book of James is it a good study on how we live the Christian life. Don't you remember when we talked about the prison epistles and we said the book of Ephesians emphasized the thrust of that book was the church of the Christ, and then we said the book of Colossians is the Christ of the church. And what do we say about the book of Philippians? The book of Philippians is all about how to live as a follower of Christ, or how to live the Christian life. And so it's really a good book of application. Very few rebukes here in this book. And when we find a rebuke, it's real gentle. Let's consider that, the gentle rebukes here. It seems like that one of the issues that was present in the church at Philippi here when he wrote the letter, and incidentally the letter was written about 10 years after the establishment. Paul's second missionary journey was somewhere in the early 50s, and the book of Philippians here, written from the prison cell, was in the early 60s. So the church at Philippi here had been in existence about 10 years. And they were subject to persecution from the Jews and also from the Romans that was there locally as well. So there was persecution. There's a problem going on. It's not a perfect situation. But one of the things that he seems to deal with here is some disunity. There seems to be a little rumbling of disunity among the church here. Let's note 3 or 4 passages that will corroborate that. Go to verse 27 of chapter 1. Verse 27, chapter 1 of Philippians reads, "Only let your conduct be worthy of the gospel of Christ, so that whether I come and see you or am absent, I may hear of your affairs, that you," watch it now, "stand fast in one spirit, with one mind, striving together for the faith of the gospel." So we'll talk about that more in the context when we get into chapter 1 here. But that's one of the verses that lets us know there was some kind of disharmony there going on. Go to chapter 2, verse 2, and note the same situation. He says, "Fulfill my joy by being like-minded." Seems like there's some of them squabbling a little bit. He said, "Having the same love, being of one accord and of one mind." And then lastly, go over to chapter 4, at a familiar passage there when he's addressing the 2 women in particular in the congregation that are at odds with one another. He says, "I implore Euodia and I implore Syntyche to be of the same mind in the Lord." Well, let's make an observation. Seems like there was a little undercurrent of some disunity going on. So Paul is addressing that. The second thing that he's addressing throughout the book probably is because of that disunity, and that is some discouragement. It seems like the brethren there were discouraged. Well, where is Paul writing this letter from? A cell, jail. And the tone of this letter is what? What's the key word? Joy. So Paul is really driving home the fact that if I can be joyous in a Roman cell, work on this disunity here and you'll be joyous. Because it doesn't have anything to do with your external circumstances. It has to do with the inward condition of your heart. So one of the things I want us to really get here is this. Disunity in a congregation and discouragement go hand in hand. Show me a congregation that's discouraged, and there's a great chance that there's disunity in that congregation, and vice versa. Show me a congregation where there's a bunch of this and a bunch of issues going on within the congregation, and I'll show you a congregation that's discouraged. That's just a fact that we can observe here right off the bat. So again, the risk of overemphasizing this, Paul, by the circumstances he's writing from and the tone of this letter, that over and over you find the word joy or rejoice in every chapter throughout the book. And he's not just telling them, but he's giving them a great personal example of, it's not about your external circumstances. Now, is there a lesson in there for us today? You bet there is. You bet there is. Because everybody that's in here I'm looking at has got issues. And you got sadness in your life to some degree. And I hate to be a prognosticator of bad, but I'll just say this: if you're not in the battle, or if you hadn't just been coming out of the valley, get ready, because you're probably just fixing to go into it. That's just life. But Paul's message is, and to us today, don't let your life be determined. Don't let your joy be determined by that. Abraham Lincoln said, a man is about as happy as he made up his mind to be. Let's be that, okay?
Well, we should never complain, really.
Well,
It's hard not to do.
I'll leave you on the tongue in cheek, okay? Don't complain, because 90% of people don't care, and the other 10% are going to think. So don't complain. Thank you for being here.
I mean, I see that on TV all the time. You take a kid that ain't got no arms. Oh, I